And this is interesting to bring out.
Mm-hmm.
What we're dealing is an issue of the mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
This toxic stress that took place from these ACEs, and it's changed the brain development of
Mm-hmm.
these individuals in such a way that it affects their attention, their decision making, their learning, and how their body and mind respond to stress, to,
Mm-hmm.
to pain. I mean, that's stress, right? When we're in pain,
Exactly.
that's very stressful in the body.
Welcome to the Pain-Free Pathways podcast. On each podcast, we will explore effective natural methods to alleviate joint and muscle discomfort. From expert interviews to the latest research and practical tips, we're here to help you find relief and reclaim your active lifestyle. Let's discover the power of natural healing together on Pain-Free Pathways. Hello and welcome to the Pain-Free Pathways podcast. This is a podcast that is dedicated to holistic health and wellness to help you to live an active and productive life. I am Agina Verrett, and I am your host of the podcast. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Dana Philisaint. Hello, Dr. Dana. How are you?
Well, thanks for having me. Very well, thank you.
Very good, very good. Thank you for being here. I know you're a busy woman. And so I'm just very privileged to have the opportunity to speak with you. Now, Dr. Philisaint, she is a social worker in background. She has her bachelor's in social working. She has her master's in social working, but she also has her doctorate of philosophy in educational psychology. She has 24 years of experience in the mental health field, and she's helped numerous individuals overcome trauma in various settings like hospitals and schools and churches, homes and military bases. And she's an author. She has written My Daily Pill Devotional, The Working of This Mind, Quick Mental Health Guide for Trauma, and she is the co-author of the mental health curriculum for youth. Now, additionally, she does do child counseling. And so she has a series entitled Emotions Are Up and Down. And when I saw that, I thought we probably need an adult version of that as well. But she uses this resource during counseling sessions to help children to manage their negative emotions appropriately. Now, she has a practice. She is the director of Mind Care, which is childhood trauma therapy in Somerville, Georgia. And there, her mission is to help individuals turn their trauma into testimonies. She trains and counsels both adults and children to be overcomers, not just cope, but to overcome. And she's very passionate about pointing people to Christ, who is able to restore and heal our minds to be like his. So again, I'm very excited to have you here. And hopefully this is going to be a very informative discussion with the audience. And so I know people are probably wondering, okay, mental health, counseling, what is the connection to this pain platform that we're kind of speaking from? And so what we're going to be addressing is something called ACEs, which are adverse childhood experiences. So just as a kind of background, can you give a little bit of explanation of what this is?
Yeah. If you don't mind, I might share a screen with you guys so you can see it as well.
Okay.
But a few years ago, I think back in 1997, there was a physician by the name of Dr. Felitti. He had a weight loss clinic, and in his weight loss clinic, he would help people, of course, lose weight, but in the process, he would recognize that they would lose all this weight, and then all of a sudden, maybe a year later, they would gain all the weight and then more.
Mm.
So he was kind of confused by that, and so he started doing some interviews with them. What he found was astonishing. Together with Kaiser Permanente and other groups, they came up with a study to see what happened in their childhood, these people's childhood, that would bring them to where they're at right now. And what he discovered, that they call it the ACEs, which is the adverse childhood experiences. And the study was called The Relationship Between Childhood Abuse and Household Dysfunction, and How It Can Lead to Causes of Early Death in Adulthood. Okay. And so with that, these were the 9 or 10 ACEs that he discovered. that many of these individuals had experienced abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse, neglect, physical or emotional, household dysfunction, like, having someone in their home that had mental illness, mothers were treated violently, or divorced homes, and substance abuse and incarceration of a relative in their home, right? And the result, he saw, they were more likely to lack physical exercises, more likely to smoke later on in life, more likely to become alcoholic, drug users, miss work, and then suffered from obesity, diabetes, depression, suicidal attempts, and STDs, and heart disease, and a whole lot of illnesses because of their early on life experiences. And then he saw that the more ACEs that they had, or the more childhood experiences that they had, negative childhood experiences, the more likely they were to have multiple of these behaviors or mental health or physical health concerns later on. So that was the study of the ACEs in a nutshell. But the result, there was the summary, and then I'm going to kind of let you tie into the pain part, because I think that's important too. The result, he said, that he found was the ACEs can have a lasting negative effect on one's health, well-being, and even opportunities. And then it concluded by saying that these experiences can increase the risk of a wide range of chronic diseases and leading causes of death, such as cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and even suicide. Wow. So that was the conclusion and the finding of that study.
Okay, okay. That's very, very sobering. And I guess the thing too is that it's interesting how something like this, a person isn't even aware of the effects that it's having, that it's even in the backdrop of their life and their living. And so they're having all this trouble. And a lot of times we just kind of think, oh, this is just life. But it's actually stemming from something way back down, the years. So that's pretty powerful. And again, this was something that I guess I came across this because when I was doing a presentation on pain, in my research, I was like, because of patients I had, I said, there's just something's not right, and sometimes I would ask questions, and there were some cases where I couldn't even get to what really happened. But I remembered, I have one lady in particular, and I still see her face. And she literally, her tears, she welled up, her eyes welled up, and she couldn't even verbalize. But what she tried to tell me was she had dealt with it. But her body was saying she hadn't. And the freshness of that emotion told me that she hadn't. Okay. So that's why, I'm going to share a little bit about what I found when I did this research. And I'm going to share my screen here real quick. And then we're going to go into a little bit more about what we need to be looking at here. Okay, so what I found, I apologize, I should have had this already set up. Okay, so this was actually a systematic review, a meta-analysis by the British Journal of Anesthesia done between 2009 and 2022. And what they found, that there was a strong association between adverse childhood experiences and chronic pain in adulthood. And they were saying that adverse childhood experiences should be considered in the patient assessment, and early intervention to prevent adverse childhood experiences may help reduce the genesis of chronic pain. So unfortunately, I'm seeing people after it has burst. But if we're knowing that this is an issue, then we can, start to address this early on. And they were saying further research into assessment interventions are needed, basically, to learn to address these early on in the process. Then this was a study, this was 2022, and they showed that there was a prevalence of adults that suffered chronic pain that had high level of ACE experiences. And so there is an 84% statistic, I guess, that they found reporting that at least one ACE had been experienced. So the different things that you listed,
Yeah.
they at least had one of those factors. Now, that was interesting enough. But then when I looked at the numbers of this, I was like, oh my goodness. So they said that incidence of chronic pain doubles in individuals with ACEs as compared to someone that has no ACE. Now, again, high number to me, but I also like numbers that show me a little bit more of the stats. And so with this same report, they were saying that the statistics emphasize the higher occurrence of childhood adversity in people living with chronic pain. The prevalence of individuals that have chronic pain conditions related to ACEs increases the healthcare utilization. And that's because there's poor adult physical and psychological health. And this creates a societal burden. The figures suggest that the total annual cost of loss of productivity due to ill health and high mortality as a result of these ACEs have been estimated at 580 billion in Europe, which is a lot. That's in Europe, a lot of dollars. And in North America, it's $748 billion. Wow. That's coming from loss of productivity and the cost of care. Now, as a physical therapist, that staggered me because we deal with a lot with back pain. And you see below here that the financial burden of productivity loss and absenteeism totals $225 billion for employers in the United States, which is a large number. And when I saw that the ACE number trumped this, I was like, oh my goodness, this is a huge problem. And it's not something that is talked about. I'm sure you find that as you're going around and sharing what you do. But I thought that was just very sobering. And so again, that's why I have you here.
This is interesting because we're combining the physical with the mental, right? Exactly. And ultimately we want you to see the spiritual too.
Exactly.
Based on what you said, and this is interesting to bring out. What we're dealing is an issue of the mind, right? This toxic stress that took place from these ACEs, and it's changed the brain development of these individuals in such a way that it affects their attention, their decision making, their learning, and how their body and mind respond to stress, to pain. I mean, that's stress, right? When we're in pain, that's very stressful in the body. And let's look at a picture of what the brain actually looks like for those individuals with a healthy brain and those who had an abused brain, who experienced some kind of trauma. You can even see the difference in just looking at the brain, of what areas highlight in a healthy brain. And those areas tend to be shut. Certain areas in the brain tend to be shut. Like I'm not dealing when we look at it in a PET scan, right? You can see the difference there. So we see the difference. So what is it that we're telling ourselves? What is the message that we're conveying, or that we have accepted as a result of these ACEs? And that's making us, incapable of healing from pain, or like seeing pain as a thing to avoid completely. Like what comes to mind for some individuals? And I don't know if that's a question that you want me to answer, but
yeah, please. Yes, indeed.
So ultimately, if we don't deal with these things, right? And then, the studies is showing that ACE can actually lead to death, right? So what is the mindset? If a person experiences pain, one of the devastating misconception that they have in their mind is my fault. So they carry around this idea that whatever happened, it was my fault. So I'm to blame. Mind you, they were children. They were not at fault at all, right? They were absolutely not the cause of what took place. And their sin is absolutely the cause. In addition to that, the enemy uses people to inflict pain upon, unfortunately, children as well, right? But that's the idea that they have. And then when they start marinating upon this idea that it's my fault, what happens? Their brain is supposed to be developing, but they're coming to the point that they're saying, I can't do anything right, right? They're in school,
Mm.
they give up very easily, right? They don't want to sit, they can't sit, they can't, their mind can't focus to study, to learn, to process, to apply. And so there's this disruptiveness in the neurodevelopment of a child or of the individual as they're growing up. And then what happens? You know, with these studies and in their schoolwork, showing that they're incapable, right? Most of the time we start putting diagnoses upon kids, right? They have ADHD, oh, something's wrong with you, you're bipolar. And so they start living with these social, emotional, cognitive impairments that then they convert to, this is who I am. You know, who am I? They're searching to find out who they are. They're seeing themselves in light of, well, you are someone living with PTSD. You are a bipolar individual. You are a schizophrenic. You are, you know, so they have now tied into more of this mindset of, I'm a nobody. They're not understanding who God says that they are. No one is showing them that, you know, their past is not their future, that God is going to take that situation and make it into something beautiful. They're not seeing all of that. All they're seeing is, I am rotten. Something's wrong with me. I'm a depressed being. There's nothing that can happen that's going to be positive in my life. Right. And then ultimately, this is where it gets really bad. They start to adapt to unhealthy behaviors or unhealthy, you know, risky behaviors. Things like alcohol. I'm going to start, you know, medicating my own self with drugs and or even do things that get them sick, or even get to the point that they injure their bodies, right? They're injured their backs, they're injured, you know, and then of course physical therapists come in and various individuals try to help them to gain back the strength. But do you think they're taking it and saying, yes, I can do it? And with all the cheerleading that you guys put on, and they're gonna be like, yes, of course I can, my muscles are gonna get stronger with the work that you're helping me with. No, because their mind is already wrapped around their incapability. I can't miss the word, right? Their inability to do anything good, their inability to grow, then the ability to develop. That's what they had. So then their idea of, I don't care anymore, I've given up, right? Like, stop trying to tell me that I'm going to be better. I'm not going to get any better. Look, I've been sick for a long time, or you know, there's nothing that you know I can do. I'm sure you've heard these messages.
Oh my goodness, yes, yes.
All the time. So you can see how the ACE does tie into you working with someone on a physical level, because the mindset was already programmed to receive only nothing but negative. Here you are trying to cheer them on to do something positive. They have identified themselves as their trauma, right? Like, I am an abused person, right? That's who I am, right? Like, I'm forever going to be a bipolar or whatever. It is, even diabetes. I mean, you might want to put that in there. Any disorder that comes in, or bodily dysfunction, things are not working properly, they have given up hope. And the message that they tell themselves carry forward into their bodies. And so you see a slow recovery or no recovery at all. You see no responsiveness to all the work and effort that you're putting in. And then as a result, then you have diseases. And so they start feeling, I really just don't feel well. And then they give up. And in result, death, early death, unfortunately.
Wow. That is something. So that is something. Yeah, very, very sobering. And so when you're dealing with people, and I mean, first let me ask you, because this is a very interesting aspect of mental health. Okay. And I mean, I have questions about, like, how do you get people to become aware? But what led you into this specializing in this part of mental health? Because this is very, very much needed.
Right. It is. So my focus is trauma, obviously, right? It's trauma focused, therapy based, because what I've learned in dealing with people with things like depression and anxiety, those are symptoms. All those things are symptoms of something deep. So people often carry around in their minds about a trauma that happened to them, and have identified themselves as such. And they carry that with them everywhere they go. And of course, their minds are then become depressed. Of course, their minds feel like they can do no good, or nothing's going to happen that's going to be positive. And anything, you know, that could happen is going to be negative, right? The anxiety starts kicking in about the future, right? Specifically, when I was a child, my dad was stabbed And I saw it. I saw him pull. I mean, it was horrific. And then his response, how he responded to the trauma, changed the course of my mindset, because he was telling people while in the event, and he's trying, survive and everything else, he was comforting people, saying, "Oh, it's going to be okay. Don't worry." People were crying, crazy. Like, it was crazy, of course,
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay.
Them doing this around, and he was calming people down. What I learned, and I'm going to show you this slide because this is important. What I learned from that, and then various things later on in my studies, is that our response to trauma makes all the difference. It's not the trauma itself. While the trauma is bad, right? And then there's nothing, I'm saying that it's like, oh yeah, it's good. No. The trauma itself is bad. But look at the definition of trauma. Trauma is an emotional response to terrible events like accident, abuse, neglect, rape, and all those things. And so when we respond a certain way emotionally, then it causes us to have long-term reactions, things like unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, a strained relationship, right? Or physical symptoms that impacts our health. So the way we respond, especially the very time that these trauma happen, or the people around us, if we're children, let's say you're a child, right? And then you go to your mom, and you share with your mom, this thing happened to me. This person sexual abused me. How did your mom respond? Did they respond like, "Oh, don't say anything like that," and become defensive of the other individual, i.e. their spouse or their stepdad or whatever, or they like comfort. I'm gonna be with you. How they respond then can lead to the response of that child. Or let's say nobody responds appropriately. Let's say they try to show that something is wrong with them. Children don't necessarily verbalize, but they will act, right? Did you see a change in your child's behavior? Did they change from one way? Because you know your child, right? And then all of a sudden you start seeing them acting a different way. How did you respond? Did you retaliate with like, go in your car and screaming and yelling and anger? Or did you say, what's going on? Let's pray about it. Let's seem to understand what's happening, right? There's changes happening. What's happening in your life? What has taken place? Tell me about your friends. Tell me about your class. Tell me about your teachers. Tell me what's happening in your life, right? Our response make all the difference when it comes to trauma and the long-term effect that you're dealing with as a physical therapist. And so to answer your question, how did I get in this field? I have had friends, people that I know that have committed suicide. Okay. And when you see these things happen, you start really questioning, what is the efficacy of what mental health counseling do? Does it really work?
Oh, wow. They had been in counseling?
Yes, some of them were, right? And it's a long story, but the short version of it is we have to get to the point I had to get to the mindset of learning. And then there was a point where I left the field because I just didn't think that it was working. I mean, it was a lot.
Okay.
But when I recognized that God had called me, number one, to help people dealing with trauma. Number two, that we cannot leave him out of the equation for them to be well. And number three, we must also deal with the physical of that person. In other words, healing comes when we deal with the person on a physical level, on a mental level, and on a spiritual level. That's when healing does occur, right? So all those things had to be taking place for healing to take place. And so that's how I kind of got into it. And the more I got into it, the more the Lord was impressing me. Yep, this is what I want you to do. I think what I saw was a focus on just one aspect of who we are as a human being, right? So yes, we're mental. And so there was a lot of just emotional talks. Oftentimes when we go to counseling, we're talking about how do you feel? How does that make you feel? The feeling and the feeling and the feeling. And the focus was just so much on the person's feelings. Now, if they have a bad feeling, all we do is highlight more of that feeling more and more. Yes, it does help sometimes to talk about it, but it doesn't bring closure. It doesn't bring healing. It doesn't bring, make us a whole being, because our minds are or I should say our body are constantly looking to see how do we act based on how we think, right? So diseases in the body are not healing as fast. Our bodies were meant to be healing, in the way that God designed it. But if we constantly feed our minds with negativity or tell them the stories over and over again, we have things like, and some people might find it like something to try, but EMDR, for example, reliving the stories over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. All we're doing is trapping people in the toxic stress that they lived under for years.
Right. Yeah, that's very powerful. And that, but that's the kind of the way the system has been, again, when I look at even within the world of physical therapy, it is changing. But it's behind times. So we tend to just look at, you have shoulder pain. And even within the world of physical therapy itself, I've always been a therapist that said, well, your shoulder, it hurts, but we've got to look at your neck, we've got to look at your mid back, I've always, looked at all of those areas, but, a lot of times we are pigeonholed into just saying, okay, can you lift the shoulder? Is it weak? With shoulder. The person sitting here and complaining, my neck is killing me. I can't sleep. I'm getting headaches. But the shoulder. So that's kind of how the medical system handles things. So mental health, physical health. So that's very, very true. And so it has to be inclusive. Definitely.
It has to be inclusive. Mm-hmm. And that's what I learned. When we start including everything of who the person is. Their relationship, their social being, their, are they going out and being part of a community of people? Right. We are connected, right? Whether it be in a church, which is highly recommended, but to be part of society is part of who we're supposed to be, right? So the community, our social being, our physical being, our mental being, our spiritual being, all that we are must be in line with the healing that God desires us to have in our mind.
Very good.
Right?
Very good.
So when we're talking about physical health, we really are talking also about spiritual health. We're talking about mental health. We're talking about all things that the person is. So when we talk about mental health, we're talking about the physical health. So it's the whole person that we need to constantly look at. So when we talking to a person, and somebody might say, why are you talking about teas? By the way, I make teas, and we mass produce teas to help people with mental, for physical.
Oh, really?
As for stress, for sleeping problems, for depression and anxiety. Why are we talking about teas? Well, because there are herbs that actually help the brain too, right? So there's that physical component. And guess what? There's a lot of people who know that, and that's what they're, banking on the pharmaceutical company. A lot of times they stay on like, I need my drug. How about we start first with natural?
Exactly.
The natural person that we are. So then I'll when I have a little chance, I'll share a little bit more about herbal teas and everything else too that we do, our books and stuff. But you understand, we have to start taking people, not just saying, like, okay, let's talk about it. What other things can they do? Are they exercising?
Right.
Are they? I mean, if they're not exercising, the mind, we know that our mind does better when we exercise. The body, the physical body respond in a way that's healthy for our brain as well, right? So we can't just talk to the person about, let's talk, tell me about your feelings. Because it's not all about feelings alone.
It's a dead end. It's a dead end approach, and like you said, I like the fact they get trapped in that. Okay, there's no growth, there's no healing, it's just rehashing, ruminating, and then that gets no one anywhere. And I appreciate something you said too, because you said that anxiety and depression are symptoms. And it was interesting because it's almost, I tell people, like, when you're dealing with pain, it's like layers on an onion. It's like you deal with one layer and then there's still something that kind of shows up. But it's interesting because I did a talk about the healing mindset, and there were 7 mindsets, and depression and anxiety were one of those mindsets that kept the person from coping and healing from pain. But even just the way you're saying that the depression and anxiety are a symptom, we treat depression and anxiety as the diagnosis.
Right.
And it's still another symptom. So just like the pain, the burning, and the aching is a symptom of something has been damaged tissue-wise.
Right.
Anxiety and depression is a symptom that emotionally damaged.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And the
So
thing,
that was very powerful. I appreciate that.
if we get stuck on just depression and anxiety, then
Right.
we won't have a need to ascertain the cause,
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's like, well, the cause is my depression. Well,
Mm-mm.
okay, well, it's depression. But where do we go with that? Right? Okay,
Exactly.
well, then the only place to go is medication, because all we're doing is saying it's a diagnosis that needs to be treated with, something
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
of
I
that nature,
got you. Yes,
right?
that's definitely
So
it. And that's why I appreciate that, because then it kind of takes away that, okay, what is we can't say cure, what is the thing to repair? What creates the recovery? And then it lets us go to, again, the source, and then
that's
dealing with the
correct.
source, whether it's something that has externally happened in
Correct.
combination with, like you're saying with the herbal teas, the changes that have happened in the brain because of the trauma, in the
That's right.
first place. So that's very, very powerful.
That's
And I
right.
know a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions when it comes to, anything that has happened to them that's been negative, and that they're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to stuff it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because you mentioned that about even a child coming and saying something, and they feel like that's that should be their safe place. That should be where they can
Yeah.
go and have it be investigated. But then how many
Right.
things, like I said, are happening like that? But the trauma is not, and I know there's different kinds of trauma. Do you have any, like, what other kinds of trauma are there other than
Yeah. Yeah.
the ACEs?
Let
Since
me
we're on
break
this
it down for
topic, I
you.
think it needs to be expanded.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at trauma, right, most of the time we talk about the ACEs because that's the one that's been studied. But if
Right.
you think about it, trauma is anything that I call traumatic,
Mm.
that I've emotionally respond in a certain way that became trauma,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So people may in let's go to, like, for grade school, for example, there are people who are being bullied right now. That's a big thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very painful to some. And some adults might say, "Well, I was bullied. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
respond." Well, that's you. And your definition of what hurts, pain, is different from that individual,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've had individuals who too, will have experienced sexual abuse. I mean, very, very bad, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they're let's say they're siblings. And one person might act one way and the other person might act a different way. Or they might have had, an alcoholic parent, or
Okay.
two alcoholic parents, I should say, right? And
Mm-hmm.
one person will act one way and the other one will go the other. What made the difference?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it different? Well, because I have now defined, I see it painful for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're created different, we're built different. And so it's really hard to just say, this is trauma, this is trauma, this is trauma. It's
Okay.
what is trauma for you?
Okay.
It's a list of things that could be traumatizing,
Mm-hmm.
that can lead itself for me to becoming depressed or have, flashbacks and all those things. Things
Mm-hmm.
like abandonment and things like even pain,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you experience physical pain, that can lead to a sense of like, oh my word, I would never be well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or rejection or accidents or, being hospitalized. There are people who are literally afraid to go to the hospital because they associated hospital to death.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there's things that you can see what is my interpretation and
Mm-hmm.
how I approach certain things and my experiences in life will then define what is trauma, what is not, and what really it could have been traumatizing, but it's not.
Okay. Okay. And it's just an individual interpretation. And, everybody is made up differently, so
Absolutely.
like some people, they cope better, and they just find healthier ways of coping.
Yeah.
And this is where I know a lot of the, because you just might have a proclivity, just because if it's like you're saying with the alcoholic parent, if the parent was alcoholic, especially if that mom was an alcoholic when they conceived,
Yeah.
then for one child, it's like they could fall into that same thing that causing trauma, but that is the coping mechanism that they go to. That's their go-to.
Right.
That's all they
Yeah.
see. And then
Yeah.
another child may just take a totally healthier, different
That's right.
route.
Absolutely. This is why I tell people I don't like the term, let me help you cope.
Yes.
It's about overcoming. We have to learn
Mm-hmm.
how it is that we need to become overcomers.
Mm-hmm.
Overcoming meaning I have gone through this experience and
Mm-hmm.
I am a survivor. Right? That's
Mm-hmm.
what overcoming. It's like I'm not gonna go around it or experience it or try to just like give up, or like
Mm-hmm.
doomed by it. I'm going to overcome this thing. I've
Okay.
gone through not covering my pain, not like, not talking about it to some they think that that's the way to cope. It's not. It's not. Like, not talking about doesn't mean it's not there, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
the peekaboo when you're a kid, right? You
Right.
peekaboo, and the person is still there, right?
Yes. True.
It's still there. So
Mm.
it's not that peekaboo of life that we go through that makes us think that we're good.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes trauma, if not dealt with, will show its ugly head at the wrong time. It will
Mm.
show its head with a smell. It will show its head, with an experience that's supposed to be memorable. It will show its head at the worst times,
I
right?
see. I
Because the
see.
brain says, I remember, because there's a lot to do with memory too in the
Mm-hmm.
brain and how the hippocampus work and so forth, right? But these senses, that then brings about the memory, whether it be a touch, smell, sight, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It brings about a memory. This
Mm-hmm.
is why we're told we need to watch, be careful. The avenues of the soul are our senses.
Mm. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
very, very important that we recognize, okay, forgiveness is huge.
Oh my goodness.
That's a whole
That's
different
another
topic,
topic. Yes.
isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because when we start to learn to forgive, forgiveness says, I've dealt with this. I mean, I can go around this and just poke at it now,
Mm-hmm.
and say that God has taken me through. It's about me and his ability to help me to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not
Right.
going to let what happened to me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago
Mm-hmm.
still be the present in my life as
Mm-hmm.
the pain that it was then to still be the pain that it is now.
Right.
I'll show you a slide real quick. I think this is important. When we talk about the issue of pain, um, and I'm doing a whole thing on addiction right now, and it's very, very, very hard to talk about for a lot of people, but a
Mm.
lot of trauma, that has happened result itself in addiction for a lot of people, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people find it where, even if it's not an addictive behavior, but they find ways to try to cover up their pain.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line, right?
Right.
But pain is human, learning system for growing. What if we saw it as such? As
Hmm.
a system that we actually grow from. You heard of growing pain. Why do we call it growing pain when muscles are, or the bones or
Bones are
whatever?
lengthening. Right.
Why
Mm-hmm.
do we call it? Why would we call it growing pain? Why? Because it is painful, but growth is taking place
Mm. Okay.
in
Okay.
the process. Now, what if we took these emotional pain and saw it in this light?
Hmm. Have mercy.
It's powerful.
That'll be
It's
very,
powerful.
very powerful.
So that's what I do. So that's what I do. I have courses that I teach on,
Okay.
just helping people understand the mindset that we need to have after pain, the ideas that we have to have. The mind of Christ is ultimately what we need to have, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
fear and control, and how that is I've heard that once,
Mm.
that is the volume knob for pain. Some
I
people go
like
towards
that.
fear, or some people go towards I need to control. But if we turn that control knob to God,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
it's amazing what he does by taking that experience and teaching us, developing us, and creating us to be like him.
Mm. Mm. Amen. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's amazing how we can see pain differently
Mm-hmm.
just by the way that we start thinking. Then we can start seeing pain as growing, as learning,
Mm.
as connection.
Mm-hmm.
That's what growing pain is about.
Right. Right.
Making new connection, making learning experiences, and taking
Mm.
opportunity to grow.
Mm.
If you're alive, you're going to go from a child to adolescent to adulthood. What is that? That's growing. That's
Exactly.
growing. And
Mm-hmm.
pain does come in those stages of life.
Stages. Right. Right. That's interesting. Yeah, because
Mhm.
when with the pain, like you said, if you I call it reframing, you hear that all the time too. So when you reframe things that
Mhm.
have happened to you, and there's someone that says that when we have things that happen, we go, oh, this happened to me. But sometimes it's happening for you.
Yeah.
And it's a way of, because the we kind of have a, life starts, as a child, like you said, you go to adulthood, and then sometimes we think for some reason we kind of hit this point and that's all there is to it. But we're always supposed to be growing. And we're
Yeah.
very good at that when it comes to educational, you know.
Yeah.
So we go back and we get a certification. We go back and we get a degree. Okay. But we are supposed to be growing emotionally
We
and
are.
and spiritually. And so
That's
when we hit these stages in our adult lives, and we're like you said, it shows up at very inopportune times, and you're like, what is, like, where is that coming from? That should make us take a pause and see that there's something that's in our psyche, in how we deal with things, and our reaction, that is not mature.
yeah.
And
But you know what? And we have to still be careful at the same time because we're talking about people who have experienced trauma,
oh
right?
yeah,
That weren't their fault. And so yes,
exactly.
it did happen, not
No,
necessarily,
yes,
and God allowed it to happen. I do believe that.
mm-hmm.
While he allowed it to happen, he didn't want it to happen. He
Exactly.
saw the potential that it can have on an eternal purpose,
Purpose, right, right.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
the purpose can still, he can use that for his good. He did not want any of one of us to
Just
experience.
exactly, exactly.
None of us.
Mm-hmm.
This is why he told Eve, do not eat of that tree, lest you
Mm-hmm.
die.
Mm-hmm.
The warning is there. Don't hurt your children. Love them.
Mm-hmm.
A home should look like this. We have counsels on how to run a home properly and how to be good parents. We have parenting class and all these things, right? That can help us to benefit us so that we don't make another person suffer, allow another person to suffer, to protect as much as we can. But
Mm-hmm.
while we're trying to do the protecting and everything else, we
Mm-hmm.
know that there's an enemy that's still alive and well. So
Right.
therefore, we are going to experience pain. In that process, he's telling us, when we experience pain,
Mm-hmm.
allow me to use it for good.
Right. No, I understand and I
Right?
agree with that totally. And I think what I was saying is that there sometimes I think we still don't identify some of those things that you had on the
Yes.
list, and the
Yes.
way it manifests itself.
Yes.
We need to recognize that if there is something that is unhealthy, then let's
Yes.
start looking at what we can do to improve. And
Very well.
sometimes you may have to pull out something that was a trauma that we
That's
didn't
right.
see it as such. Yeah. But definitely. Tell people that God does not waste,
That's right.
so experiences, time, even resources. And sometimes it's like, Lord, okay, so how is this going to work out for good? I have to trust that it will. But you're right. We do have an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
People just, and that's the part people don't realize, is the warfare that we're in. And so God never, and I appreciate you bringing that out, because the other thing was that I do have people who are dealing with a lot of trauma,
Yeah.
a lot of challenges. They don't have answers. They don't
Yeah.
understand why it's happening. And so there is a tendency to turn inward, but there's
Yeah.
no answer there. There's also a tendency to turn away from what can actually bring you through, which is a power, which is God, we believe in, bigger than
Yeah.
you, more
Yes.
capable than you, and
Yes.
who loves you,
That's right.
and wants to bring that circumstance around to still help you to still grow in spite of it.
That's
So I totally get what you're saying, and I appreciate you bringing out even the other types of trauma above and beyond the ACEs, because it's
right.
all about, let's get well. Let's get stronger. So I do want to hear a little bit more. So what do you do? We kind of touched on it. What do you do to help people?
Okay. Well, let me just share a little bit more about our ministry business, as I call it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, see it there. Okay. So we have a ministry, a business called Mind Care, Childhood Trauma Therapy. And in Mind Care, our
So
main focus,
hold on. I'm seeing Zoom. I'm not
oops,
seeing your
no, let's
just
start
switch
there.
your slide. Yeah.
All right. Can you see that now? It
There
still
we
sees.
are. Perfect.
Okay, good. So that's our ministry and that's our logo, Mind Care, Childhood Trauma Therapy. And at
Mm-hmm.
Mind Care, our main focus obviously is counseling. and people come to us because they desire counseling and coaching. And so we see people literally from around the world. We have coaches that work with us. We train our coaches as well. And so people who want to be trained on how to become a coach, we use their stories to help bring out their testimony to help others as well. In addition to that, we have an online course. And in our online course, oops, you can't see that. Not sure why. Our online course is completely online. People pay one time and they have access to it for 6 months. And we meet monthly. We discuss things. There's tons of things for them to do on the online course. And our website, mindcare.us, will give you all that information. And the things that you're going to be learning. We talk a lot about trauma. We talk about the mindset. We talk about the mind-body connection as well, which is some of the things that we discussed here today. We talk about how God desires us to be whole. How can we be whole after experiencing various things in life? And so that's our online class. And then I go around and do seminars and presentations on mental health and trauma, and addiction, and things to help people see God's way of dealing with these things called the mind. And then also, and this is what I brought out, we have books that we have written, that I have written. I've written several books, but for our adult population, we have The Working Up This Mind, we have The Quick Mental Health Guide for Trauma, we have a curriculum for youth. So if there's homeschoolers who want, parents who want to teach their children, what information should I teach you about mental health? This is a curriculum for that. We have the daily pill for mental health, for mental fitness, I should say. Something to get you going every morning. Have the mind that God desires us to have with Bible texts and inspiring, and also a thought about practical. How do we make it practical? And then we sell teas as well. We call it a CPR. Calm, peace, and rest.
Oh, nice.
So herbal teas, herbal teas to help people deal with the mind. You can have a mindset that is of peace, that is of calmness and rest. There are herbs that we know that actually does those things without having to go the pharmaceutical route, initially, or that's as if that's the only answer. There are other alternative ways to deal with those things, and that's what we do.
Okay, very good.
We always ask people to keep us in your prayer and support us. Share the information. We have a YouTube channel that's Mind Care for Trauma, that we put out information on a regular basis to help people learn more about the mindset that we can have even after trauma. So that's Mind Care in a nutshell.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so it's a very all-encompassing approach, and I really appreciate seeing that, because I just very much so, and I think we resonate on the fact that we have to look at the whole person. And I truly believe that if anyone is dealing with any kind of physical pain,
that's right,
and they're not able to let go of that pain, they definitely need to dig deeper. They need to dig deeper. And I really do appreciate you peeling off that layer about the mindset portion, and that we still, we can't look at that as still the stopping point. We've got to even go even deeper than that. So so what we will do, I will share the information, where I post this. And so we will be having this on the podcast at Spotify, and then we're going to put it on YouTube. But I also share it on Facebook. But I really have appreciated having you here, because I know that, like I said, when I came across that statistic about the ACEs, and I was like, this is, I say ridiculous, but I was blown away. I was blown away. And so you've given very good insight, about what that can look like for people. And I know you had way much more information to share. But hopefully this gives people a little bit of a taste of, because it's enough information for you to start recognizing. So sometimes you just need something to allow you to see, like I said, that aha moment of, maybe I need to understand myself a little bit more. What's going on? Just what's going on. And just understanding you all. The whole point of why I'm doing what I do here is because I understand that, medications are not the answer. first and foremost, okay? And that you have to have a holistic, whole person approach to anything you're doing if you want to deal with your pain. And recognize that it's not always what we're understood or taught in just the traditional way of approaching with living life on planet Earth in pain. And you see the statistics. We want to change those statistics, but we also know you can't keep doing the same thing you're doing, expecting that things are going to improve. I know some of this sounds so different to you, but you've got to do something different if you want some different results. So Dr. Phyllis Saint, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for taking, because this lady is so busy. And so I'm appreciating you taking the time. We had a few technological things here, but I appreciate your ministry, your business ministry is what I like to call it. And I appreciate what you're doing. And I just pray for you that you will continue to be successful, and hopefully, we'll be able to connect at some point down the road again. Okay. So
thank you for the time to allow me to just share what I'm passionate about, and what God put in my heart to share with whomever would listen. And so I just pray that whoever is listening right now know that, God truly has a purpose for you, and whatever pain that you're going under, whether it be physical pain, mental pain, I might even add a spiritual pain, something that, you just don't understand about who God is. Know that first and foremost, that you are loved. He loves you with an everlasting love, and he has a desire for you to be well. Above all things, he said, I desire that you be in good health and that you may prosper. So that is my hope and prayer for all who are listening today.
All right. Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for joining. And we will be in contact with you through another podcast episode in the near future. And if you like this, please share it, because the people need to hear this information. Thanks again. Thank you, Dr. David. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Pain-Free Pathways, and we hope that you found valuable insights and practical tips to help you on your journey to living a pain-free, active life. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and if you enjoyed today's discussion, please leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to bring you the best content, and we ask that you join us next time as we continue to explore the power of natural healing and recovery. Until then, stay well, and remember, we are dedicated